Today is obviously the 21st of November, but guess when Pope Francis actually said what we're going to review? He said it on the 10th. Now, the 10th should be memorable to many of us already because it was on the 10th of this month that the Vatican came out and removed Bishop Joseph Strickland from ministry. And everybody was asking, well, wait, what about the German bishops? So it was literally on that very day that Bishop Strickland was removed from ministry that Pope Francis responded again to the German bishops. Let's look at the actual speech, or not speech, I should say text, that he gave so we can go straight to the source itself. So here is what he said in a letter that he wrote to 4 influential German Catholic laywomen in the Church of Germany. Pope Francis has written a letter to 4 German Catholic laywomen expressing his concerns about the direction of the church in Germany. This is also then an English translation from CNA, by the way. From the Vatican, November 10th, again, the day that it was announced that Strickland was removed, the same day he moves on the Germans. I extend my gratitude for your kind letter dated November 6th. Your concerns regarding the current developments within the church in Germany have reached me, and I share your concerns. These are people who have left, who have resigned from key positions in Germany. We'll learn about that here in a moment. They had concerns about what's going on with the German bishops. They resign, and Pope Francis shares his concerns with them. There are indeed numerous steps being taken by significant segments of this local church that threaten to steer it increasingly away from the universal church's common path. Mic drop. He is saying the German bishops are threatening church unity. In other words, they are pushing for schism. Now, make no mistake about it, some of these German bishops are already materially in schism. They have not yet entered into a formal schism yet. And Pope Francis is doing his best to avoid that. But they are materially in schism in several ways. And he's saying Germany is threatening the unity of the church with what it is doing. This doubtlessly includes the establishment of the synodal committee you referenced. So they wrote a letter to him on November 6th, and they're referring to the problems with the synodal path in Germany. And Pope Francis is saying, I agree with you. This committee aims to set up a consultative and decision-making body. However, as outlined in the corresponding resolution, its proposed structure is not in alignment with the sacramental structure of the Catholic Church. Consequently, its formation was forbidden by the Holy See in a letter dated January 16th, 2023, which received my specific endorsement. We're going to look at that letter here in a moment, but he is saying, make no mistake about it, Germany and what it is doing with the synodal way is not Catholic. It is pushing for schism, and it is contrary to Catholic ecclesiology, the way the church is structured, the way bishops function. They do not have the authority to act in the way that they are acting. And so it is clear, and we'll continue reading the letter here in a moment, but this is big because he is cutting them off at the head. And he's saying all these decisions that Germany is attempting to make in Germany through the synodal way, they are not authoritative, and nobody has to follow them. Nobody in Germany has to follow any of this because the Holy See has already forbidden this type of organization, this kind of abuse of authority. He's saying, if you're like a priest out there and your bishop is saying, hey, you need to go and bless this union, Pope Francis is saying, you don't have to listen to that. You don't have to listen to that bishop because I as the one who am over the universal church, I, through the Holy See, have said, this is not canonical, this is not authoritative. So no priest and no lay faithful have to follow anything that the German bishops do through the synodal process. Nobody has to follow it because they don't have the authority to implement the directives that they're attempting to push through in Germany. So, in other words, people can rest assured in their conscience that they're not dissenting against lawful authority because the Pope is saying they don't have this authority. He's cutting them off at the head. So, he's not only addressing issues with gay blessings, he's also addressing issues with women's ordination. And we're going to see what else Pope Francis has said and done about these things. But he's also anticipating and addressing anything else the Synod attempts to put through in Germany. He's saying you can't do this. This whole thing is structured in a way that is contrary to the way the church is actually structured. It has no authority. He's cutting them off at the head. Watch the rest of the letter here. It's pretty interesting. In my letter to the pilgrim people of God in Germany. If y'all are not familiar with that, you need to go and read it because Pope Francis writes directly to the people of God in Germany. And we're going to actually look at a few interesting points there from what he said because, wow, it goes contrary to the narrative that we hear about Pope Francis. He said, in my letter to the pilgrim people of God in Germany, I sought not to find salvation in constantly evolving committees, nor to persist in self-absorbed dialogues rehashing the same themes. Boy, that does describe the Germans. They keep coming with the same stuff over and over and over. Rather, I aimed to re-emphasize the importance of prayer, penance, and adoration, something that unfortunately the German bishops are missing, according to Pope Francis. They're missing prayer, penance, and adoration. And by the way, sneak peek, he's also saying they're missing real evangelization because they're trying to make themselves like the world rather than evangelizing the world with the gospel. That's a sneak peek for you. I urged an openness and a call to action to engage with our brothers and sisters, especially those found at the thresholds of our church doors, in the streets, within prisons, hospitals, public squares, and cities. I firmly believe that in these places, the Lord will guide us, bringing the gospel to them. I commend your contributions to theology and philosophy, and thank you for your witness to the faith. May the Lord bless you, and may the Blessed Virgin Mary keep you. I kindly ask that you continue to pray for me and for our shared commitment to unity, united in the Lord, Francis. And he also did sign this by hand. So this is directly from Pope Francis. Now we're going to look at what the German Catholic laywomen have said in response to this letter written to them, as well as these other documents that Pope Francis is pointing them to. So not only forbidding Germany to do what it's doing, we're also going to look at what Pope Francis has done in canon law, forbidding further the Germans from doing what they're doing. We're also going to look at that letter of the Holy Father, once again undermining the German bishops and telling them stop following the ways of the world. Stop trying to listen to the world and be conformed to the image of the world. Rather, listen to Jesus, follow Christ, follow the Gospels, and transform the world with the message of Christianity. Here is from CNA. They report the response from the German Catholic laywomen. It says Pope Francis has expressed deep reservations about the direction of the Catholic Church in Germany, warning that concrete steps currently being taken threaten to undermine unity with the universal church. Again, make no mistake about it. The Germans are pushing for schism. They are threatening church unity. The Pope made his criticisms in a letter to 4 German Catholic laywomen that was published in the German newspaper Welt on November 21st. So again, it was just published today, but he actually wrote it on the same day that he announced Bishop Strickland and his removal from ministry. There are indeed numerous steps being taken by significant segments of this local church that threaten to steer it increasingly away from the universal church's common path, the Pope wrote. The letter dated November 10th and was written in German and included the Pope's handwritten signature. So it's not like this is a forgery. Chief among the Pope's concerns is a push to set up a permanent synodal council, a mixed body of laity and bishops that would govern the Catholic Church in Germany. You can't do that when it comes to exercising the authority of the episcopate, is what is being said here. Now, it is interesting at the Council of Constance, one of our ecumenical councils, we did have laity voting there, but ordinarily, you only have bishops who are voting members of an ecumenical council. But here we're not even talking about an ecumenical council. We're talking about the way in which, on the local level, dioceses are governed. And that needs to be episcopal, not something that is done by the laity or a mixture of the two. Now, of course, laity can advise bishops. Absolutely. And of course, laity can do other things in the diocese, but actually governing, who has the authority to govern in the Catholic Church? According to Jesus, he gave that authority to the apostles. Now, do we have any apostles alive today? No. But what we do have is successors to the apostles, and those are the bishops. So what they are doing with the synodal process on the local level is contrary to the way Jesus established the Catholic Church in the way it's to be governed. And you might think, well, wait, I thought that there's lay participants at the Pope's synod in Rome. Isn't the Pope contradicting himself? No. And see, this is where people are missing it. The Synod of Bishops in Rome is a consultative body only. It is not actually an episcopal body. It is a consultative body, and the Pope can ask for people's opinion and advice from, frankly, anybody, whether they're a bishop or not. And so that's what that is. However, in Germany, whenever they have this synodal way and this synodal process, is that merely an advisory body? No. The Germans are trying to use the synodal way not as an advisory body, but actually as the body to govern the German churches. So, in other words, what Pope Francis is doing in Rome, with laity being involved in consulting the Pope, is not an issue. But what the Germans are doing with the synodal way, with mixing laity and bishops in governing the church, that is a problem. Now, this obviously goes against the narrative of people who have been saying the Pope is trying to change the structure of the church with the Synod of Bishops in Rome. No, he's not. It's a consultative body. This isn't something established by Jesus. The Synod of Bishops is less than 100 years old. It was started by Pope Paul VI. So it's not something that goes back to Jesus. This is not something that's part of the constitution of the church. But you know what is part of the constitution of the church? Government on the local level. And what are the Germans trying to do? They're trying to alter the way in which the local level is governed, which is a threat against the constitution of the church on the local level. It is a threat against it. Their ecclesiology is not Catholic. And that's what the Pope is saying. And that is why the Pope and the Holy See has forbidden what they're doing. And they have told them, you can't go through with this process. And it's not authoritative. So anybody out there in Germany who thinks that they're bound to follow the synodal process, you're not. That is not a lawful exercise of authority by the bishops in Germany, according to the Pope. You have the Pope backing you up if you want to say, I'm not going to listen to my bishop when he tells me, perhaps as a priest, to bless a gay union. Or I'm not going to listen to my bishop when he tells me, well, if you don't want to bless it, at least refer these people to a priest who will. You don't have to listen to your bishop when he does that. He's not exercising authority lawfully, because a higher authority, i.e. the Pope, has overruled that lower authority. He's cutting the Germans off at the head. Rather than going the route of, well, let's go ahead and trigger a formal schism by excommunicating or removing all of these bishops from their episcopal sees, knowing that they're not going to yield to that. They're just going to remain in their episcopal sees, and they're not going to listen to the Pope. Instead of going the route of, we're now going to have a formal schism, and there's really no way to bring this schism back into the unity of the church. Instead of that, he's cutting them off at the head, and he's just saying, you guys basically don't have any authority to do what you're doing. And so nobody really has to listen to you. And then he's overruling them in canon law. That's what's incredible here. We'll get to that here in a moment. Look at this. Establishing this council is a top priority for the German synodal way, a controversial initiative that has demanded significant changes in church structure and teaching. In his letter, the Pope underscored that this kind of consultative and decision-making body, as currently proposed, is not in alignment with the sacramental structure of the Catholic Church. He referenced a January 16 letter from high-ranking Vatican officials to German bishops, which he specifically authorized. So he authorized it, that explicitly prohibited the establishment of the synodal council. And yet Germany has just said, we're going to ignore you and continue to be in dissent. Rome has said, you can't do this. A committee of synodal way leadership recently met at November 10th in Essen to lay the groundwork for the synodal council, which they aim to establish no later than 2026. Rome has said, you can't do this. 4 German bishops voted in June to block funding for the preparatory committee, and a total of 8 out of 27 German ordinaries were absent from the November 10 meeting. In his recent letter, Francis proposed a different path forward for the church in Germany. Instead of seeking salvation in constantly evolving committees or self-absorbed dialogues, rehashing the same themes, the Pope underscored the need for the Catholic Church in Germany to be rooted in prayer, penance, and adoration. Boy, do we need that these days. Wouldn't it be nice if the German bishops stopped their dissent against the magisterium and spend that time instead in prayer, penance, and adoration? Wow, that'd be incredible. He also called upon German Catholics to engage with our brothers and sisters on the margins, especially the sick, imprisoned, and those at the thresholds of our church doors. I firmly believe that in these places the Lord will guide us. The letter was addressed to the theologians Katharina, I don't even know how to pronounce that last name, Wester Horstmann, and Marianne Schlosser, journalist Doritha Schmidt, and the religious philosopher Hannah Barbara Gerl Falkowitz. The 4 German laymen had previously been delegates to the synodal way. So they were delegates, but they resigned in February in protest. Now, listen to this. They resigned in protest against the synodal way. Pope Francis writes to them and encourages them and says, I agree with what you're doing. That's, again, more shots fired at the German bishops. They wrote to the Pope on November 6th, expressing their concerns about the direction of the Catholic Church. 4 days later, he writes them back. I mean, Johnny on the spot, as I say, right? He responded really quickly to them. In his response, the Pope urged the 4 women to pray for him and for our common cause of unity. Why? Because the Germans are threatening the unity of the Catholic Church. They are pushing for a formal schism. Not just the material schism that they're already in, at least the ones who are on board with the synodal way, but they're pushing for a formal schism. The German theologian Martin Brusk described the Pope's letter as clear and forceful signal to halt the work of the Synodal Committee. The flagship of Peter has given the German church a broadside across the bow, said Brusk in a statement provided by New Beginning, a group of German Catholics critical of the synodal way. That's right. Not everybody in Germany is a bad person. Not all Catholics in Germany have lost the faith. There are faithful Catholics in Germany. Excuse me. Those who do not want to hear and see this will bear full responsibility if they ultimately disappear into the maelstrom of division. Leadership of the German synodal way has recently framed their push to establish the Synodal Council as consistent with Pope Francis's emphasis on increased synodality in the Catholic Church, including the recent Synod on Synodality assembly at the Vatican. What a lie. You see how Satan twists things? Oh, well, the Pope, you have a synod of bishops in Rome, and therefore that grants what we're doing with our synod. But they're equivocating, because the Synod of Bishops in Rome is merely consultative. It is not a governing body, nor is it a teaching body, according to Pope Francis himself. He actually put that into canon law to make sure people are clear. The Synod of Bishops has no teaching authority. It certainly has no governing authority. But then they're equating Rome and its Synod of Bishops with the actual synod or synodal way in Germany, which itself is not merely an advisory body. It is a body that is attempting to govern the church in Germany. And so they're trying to equate it and map it onto what the Pope is doing, but it's not the same, which is why the Pope has been telling them, stop doing what you're doing. You're threatening the unity of the church. I do not give you authorization to do this. You're harming the unity of the body, and you're actually violating the way in which Christ established the governance of his church.